Beneath the cold silver moonlight of Elizabethan England, where secrets whispered in the shadows, and beauty was a weapon sharper than any sword, lies a tale of women who gambled everything for perfection only to face the pale embrace of death. In the opulent halls of 1578 England, where candlelight flickered on damask walls and ambition pulsed like a heartbeat, beauty was no mere adornment, it was power. A woman's face could unlock courtly favor, secure a noble marriage, or earn a monarch's glance. The ideal was unmistakable. Skin as white as snow, unmarred by sun or toil, proclaimed nobility, chastity, and wealth. Pallor was a currency, more potent than gold in a world where status hinged on appearance. To be pale was to be divine, a living echo of the Virgin Mary's ivory visage in cathedral frescoes, or the snow-fair muses of Petrarchan sonnets. To be tan was to be common, chained to the fields of serfs. Lady Margaret Hale, a 19-year-old noblewoman of modest lineage, stood before her polished bronze mirror in her family's draughty manner, her fingers tracing her sun-kissed cheeks, born on the fringes of courtly life. She yearned to ascend to catch a suitor's eye, perhaps even glimpse Queen Elizabeth herself at a masque. But her skin, kissed by summer meadows, betrayed her rural roots. "You must be a ghost to be a queen," her mother whispered, pressing a small jar into her trembling hands. Venetian ceruse, they called it, a creamy paste promising the alabaster glow of nobility. Margaret's pulse quickened as she opened it, the metallic scent sharp, almost otherworldly. This was no mere cosmetic. It was a rite of transformation. Across England, women of the gentry and the aristocracy pursued this alchemy. In London's Cheapside, apothecary shops hummed with urgency, their shelves lined with jars of lead-based paints and mercury-laced creams. These were the tools of beauty, crafted with the reverence of a goldsmith. Merchants imported lead from Venice, mercury from Spain, and arsenic from the Low Countries, feeding a growing obsession. The pursuit of pale perfection was a daily devotion, rooted in a culture that equated whiteness with worth. Margaret's first brush-stroke was tentative, the ceruse cool against her skin. It dried to a smooth, opaque veil, erasing freckles and flushing her cheeks with ghostly radiance. Her mirror, once a critic, now sang her praises. She was no longer a country girl, but a vision of courtly grace. Yet beneath the surface a shadow stirred. The powder clung like a second skin, its leaden weight seeping into her pores. She noticed a faint itch, a tremor in her fingers, but dismissed them. Duty demanded sacrifice, and sacrifice was noble. The transformation was immediate. At a local banquet, Margaret glided into the candlelit hall, her pale face drawing gasps. "She looks an angel," a young courtier murmured, his eyes lingering. Her heart soared. For the first time she felt seen. Her dreams of court within reach, but the flattery masked a truth she couldn't yet grasp. The powder that made her radiant was weaving a deadly spell, infiltrating her blood, her bones. She wanted to look like a queen. Instead, she was becoming a ghost. This was the paradox of Elizabethan beauty, a quest for divinity that courted ruin. The pale obsession gripped noblewomen, driven by a society that prized appearance above all. Venetian ceruse, applied with rabbit hair brushes, was no innocent paint. It was an alchemical trap, promising perfection while delivering poison. Apothecaries, half-healers, half-sorcerers, peddled it with zeal, ignorant of its toll. Women like Margaret, caught in the mirror's gaze, saw only the promise, not the price. The obsession was not hers alone. It radiated from the heart of England's court, where one woman's face inspired a nation to poison itself. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, was its architect, her own pale visage a symbol of divine authority. Her image, carefully crafted, set a standard that ensnared her subjects. Margaret, like countless others, followed her lead, unaware that the Queen's beauty was a curse disguised as a crown. The stage was set for a tragedy, one painted in shades of white. As Margaret retired that night, her face still caked with ceruse, she dreamed of Whitehall's glittering halls. But her sleep was restless, her skin prickling beneath its mask. The pale obsession had taken root, and with it the seeds of her undoing. In the shadows of her chamber, the mirror watched, silent and complicit as beauty began its slow betrayal. The pale obsession that gripped women like Lady Margaret Hale was no mere whim, it was a royal decree, etched in the ghostly visage of Queen Elizabeth I in the glittering heart of England's court, where power was as much a performance as a birthright. The Virgin Queen crafted an image that dazzled her subjects and doomed her imitators. Her face, a mask of unearthly pallor, was the spark that set a nation ablaze with vanity, its flames fed by poison. By the 1570s, Elizabeth was more than a monarch, she was a myth. Her portraits, sent to allies and hung in noble halls, showed a woman untouched by time. Fiery red hair, eyes sharp as diamonds, and skin so white it seemed carved from moonlight. This was no accident. At 45, Elizabeth's face bore the scars of a brutal foe. Smallpox contracted in 1562, the disease, a spectre that haunted England's cities, left her skin pitted and raw. The same lead-based paint that Margaret Hale brushed onto her cheeks with trembling hope. Elizabeth's regimen was meticulous. Each morning, her ladies-in-waiting gathered in her privy chamber, their hands steady as they mixed ceruse with vinegar, creating a creamy paste that smoothed her scars. A Mercury sublimate wash, stinging and sharp, peeled away damaged skin, leaving a raw canvas for the paint. Egg white added a glossy sheen, while a dusting of arsenic powder banished any lingering freckles. The result was a face that defied mortality, a mask of power that silenced whispers of her frailty. Her subjects, seeing only the icon, marveled at her ageless grace. But the Queen's beauty was a lie that cost her dearly. Beneath the ceruse, her skin cracked and peeled, forcing heavier applications. Mercury, seeping into her blood, blackened her teeth and thinned her hair. Hidden by elaborate wigs, her hands, once steady, trembled as she signed decrees, a secret her physicians doted but dared not voice. To question her regimen was to question her majesty. Elizabeth persisted, her face a stark white canvas that hid a wasting body, her resolve as iron as her crown. Her court, a mirror of her will, followed her lead. Noble women like Margaret Hale, who dreamed of emulating the Queen's radiance, saw her pallor as the pinnacle of elegance. At masques and banquets, ladies-in-waiting competed to match her glow, their faces painted thick with ceruse. The trend was a contagion spreading from Whitehall to manor houses across England. Apothecaries, sensing profit, churned out jars of lead and mercury, their shops in Cheapside glowing with the promise of royal beauty. Merchants imported raw materials from Venice and Seville, feeding the frenzy This royal fashion was a silent killer. The queen's own frailty was a warning, but her courtiers were blind to it. Women like Lady and Clifford, a young attendant, grew sallow and weak, their painted faces glowing under torchlight, but their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Whispers of illness circulated, tremors, headaches, fainting spells, but the fashion endured. To be pale was to be loyal, to mirror the queen's divine image. Even as women fell ill, they clung to their powders, addicted to the illusion of perfection. Elizabeth's curse was not hers alone. Her beauty, a symbol of England's glory, inspired a deadly devotion. At court, the air was thick with ambition and envy, each woman striving to outshine her rival. Margaret, now a frequent guest at local banquets, heard tales of the Queen's radiance and redoubled her efforts. Layering ceruse over her itching skin, she imagined herself at Whitehall, her face as luminous as Elizabeth's, unaware that the Queen's own health was crumbling under the same poison. The court became a gallery of ghosts. At a 1579 masque, the Queen's entrance drew gasps, her face a vision of porcelain perfection, but those closest to her saw the truth. Her movements were stiff, her smile strained. Her ladies, painted to match, were no better. Some leaned on servants, their strength sapped by the toxins they wore. Yet the charade continued, driven by a culture that prized appearance above life itself. The irony was stark. Elizabeth, who sought to project eternal strength, weakened herself and her court. Her physicians, like Dr. John Bannister, noted the toll but feared her wrath. Apothecaries, backed by wealthy patrons, dismissed concerns, touting ceruse as a miracle. The Queen, unaware of the full danger, set a standard that trapped her subjects in a cycle of vanity and decay. Her image, meant to unify, became a curse that echoed through England's halls. As Margaret Hale readied herself for another banquet, her mirror reflecting a face as pale as the Queen's, she felt a pang of pride. She was closer to her dream, her skin a testament to her ambition. But her hands shook, her breath came short, and her skin burned beneath its mask. The Queen's curse had found her, its roots deep in the powder she revered. The stage was set for a darker act, one where beauty's true cost would be revealed not in the mirror, but in the body's silent screams. In the dimly lit shops of London's Cheapside, where dried herbs hung from rafters, and the air carried the sharp tang of vinegar, beauty was forged in crucibles of poison. The pale obsession that drove Lady Margaret Hale to paint her face and Queen Elizabeth I to craft her divine mask was no mere fashion, it was alchemy, a blend of science and sorcery that promised transformation but delivered death. The powders and pastes that women like Margaret revered were not cosmetics. They were elixirs of ruin, mixed by apothecaries who wielded ignorance as deftly as their mortar. Venetian ceruse, the cornerstone of Elizabethan beauty, was a deceptively simple creation. Lead carbonate, ground to a fine powder, was blended with vinegar to form a creamy paste that dried into an opaque, porcelain-like veil. Applied with rabbit hair brushes, it erased freckles and scars, bestowing the ghostly glow that Margaret saw in her mirror and Elizabeth displayed at court. But ceruse was only the beginning. Mercury sublimate, a crystalline poison, was used as a skin peel, dissolving the outer layer to reveal a fresh canvas beneath. Egg whites added a glossy sheen, while arsenic powders, dusted lightly, promised to banish blemishes. These were the tools of perfection, crafted with the precision of a goldsmith, but the peril of a plague. Apothecaries were the era's alchemists, half-healers, half-magicians, their shops a crossroads of ambition and desperation. In 1580, as Margaret Halley's reliance on Cyrus grew, she visited Master Thomas Culpeper, a renowned apothecary whose shop was a labyrinth of jars and alembics, a face to rival the Queen's. He promised, handing her a heavy jar labeled in Latin. Margaret, her skin already itching from daily use, trusted him as she trusted her priest, but Culpeper, like his peers, was blind to the danger. The science of the time, steeped in Paracelsus's teachings, hailed Mercury as a purifier and lead as a beautifier. Toxicity was a mystery, its symptoms mistaken for divine tests or humoral imbalances. The process was a daily ritual as sacred as prayer. Margaret began her mornings at her dressing table, surrounded by maids who whispered of courtly gossip. First, a mercury wash, its sting a reminder of renewal. Then ceruse, layered thickly to hide the raw, peeling skin beneath. Finally, a dusting of arsenic to set the look, its faint burn a badge of commitment. The mirror reflected a vision of nobility, but her body told a darker tale. Lead seeped into her bloodstream. Mercury attacked her nerves, and arsenic gnawed at her organs. Each jar was a pact with death, signed in the name of beauty. This alchemy was a paradox. It created radiance by destroying flesh. Women like Margaret, inspired by Elizabeth's iconic pallor, saw Cyrus as a path to power. At court, the Queen's ladies-in-waiting applied it with fervor, their faces glowing under chandeliers, but the cost was evident in their trembling hands, their sallow cheeks beneath the paint. Elizabeth herself, now in her late 40s, relied on thicker layers to mask her crumbling skin, her apothecaries supplying ever stronger concoctions. The court, a stage for perfection, hid a gallery of decay, its players unaware of the poison they wore. The ignorance was not universal. Some alchemists, like John Dee, Elizabeth's own adviser, hinted at the dangers of heavy metals, but their voices were drowned by profit. Apothecaries thrived as demand soared, their shops bustling with noble women seeking the Queen's look. Merchants imported lead from Venice's mines, mercury from Spain's Almaden, and arsenic from Flanders, turning beauty into a global trade. The formulas grew bolder. Some added belladonna to dilate pupils. Others mixed rosewater to mask the metallic stench. Each innovation tightened the trap, binding women to their mirrors. Margaret's devotion deepened with each visit to Culpeper's shop. Her skin, once smooth, now flaked like old parchment, forcing her to buy stronger ceruse. Duty demands patience, Culpeper said. Offering a new mercury blend, she nodded, ignoring the tremors in her fingers, the headaches that plagued her nights. Her dreams of court, fueled by tales of Elizabeth's radiance, drove her to persist. She imagined herself at a royal masque, her face as luminous as the Queen's, unaware that the poison she applied was the same that weakened her sovereign. The court's obsession mirrored Margaret's. At a 1580 banquet, Elizabeth's entrance silenced the room, her face a vision of porcelain under her jeweled crown. But those closest saw the cracks, her stiff movements, her strained smile. Her ladies, painted to match, were no better, some leaning on servants as their strength waned. The alchemy of vanity was a shared delusion, its promise of perfection lie that bound Queen and subject alike. Margaret, hearing of such scenes, felt a thrill of connection, her own painted face a tribute to her idol. Yet the body rebel where the mind comply. Margaret's maids whispered of her thinning hair, her blackened teeth, but she dismissed them. To stop was to surrender her dreams, to fade into obscurity. The mirror, her constant judge, showed a face that could rival nobility, but her pulse raced with unease. The alchemy that promised divinity was a slow poison, its ingredients a recipe for ruin. As she prepared for another banquet, her hands shaking as she applied her ceruse, she stood on the edge of a truth too terrible to face one that physicians and priests would soon dare to voice. The mirror lay, but the body did not, in the shadowed chambers of Elizabethan England, where Lady Margaret Hale and countless noble women painted their faces to mirror Queen Elizabeth's divine pallor. Beauty's poison began to exact its toll. The Venetian ceruse that promised perfection, the mercury that stripped away flaws, and the arsenic that set their ghostly glow were no longer allies, they were betrayers, unraveling flesh and spirit with cruel precision. The pale obsession, born in hope and crowned by a royal decree, was now a slow disintegration, its victims trapped in a dance with death. Margaret Hale, now 25, stood before her bronze mirror in 1584, barely recognizing the reflection. Her skin, once smooth as cream, flaked like old parchment, raw and weeping beneath layers of ceruse. Her hair, once a cascade of chestnut curls, fell in clumps, forcing her to wear wigs of horsehair that edged her scalp. Her teeth, stained black by mercury, ached with every bite, and her hands trembled, spilling the precious powder she still applied daily. Yet each morning she painted her face, brushing ceruse over sores, her strokes desperate but defiant. To stop was unthinkable. Her pallor was her identity, her key to the courtly dreams kindled years ago by tales of Elizabeth's radiance. This was the cost of beauty, a body betrayed by its own ambition. Lead poisoning, insidious and relentless, seeped into Margaret's blood, attacking her nervous system with tremors, headaches, and fogged memory. Mercury, absorbed through her skin, triggered slurred speech and creeping psychosis, moments where her thoughts slipped like sand. Arsenic, dusted lightly to banish freckles, eroded her stomach, leaving her gaunt and hollow-eyed. The symptoms were unmistakable, yet she persisted, addicted to the mirror's false promise. Her maids, once eager to assist, now exchanged worried glances as they brushed her thinning hair, their whispers drowned by her resolve. The court, a gilded stage for Elizabeth's pale ideal, was a gallery of decay. Noble women, once vibrant, shuffled through Whitehall's halls, their faces caked with ceruse to hide peeling skin. Lady and Clifford, a favorite from 1580's masques, now leaned on servants, her strength sapped by tremors. Lady Catherine Grey, once a rival to Elizabeth's beauty, descended into madness, ranting in her chambers about shadows on her skin. Their laughter, once bright, turned brittle, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet they painted on each layer a defiance of their crumbling bodies, each stroke a plea to remain relevant in a world that worshipped whiteness. Elizabeth herself was not immune. At 51, the Queen's reliance on ceruse had grown desperate, her face a thick mask that cracked with every smile. Her teeth, blackened stumps, were hidden behind closed lips, her thinning hair buried under jeweled wigs. Her hands shook as she held court, a secret her physicians noted in hushed tones. The mercury washes that peeled her skin left it raw, demanding heavier paint to maintain her divine image. Her court, mirroring her devotion, followed her into ruin, their painted faces a grotesque echo of her own. The Queen's curse, as Margaret had learned in Cheapside's apothecary shops, was a contagion that spared no one. The addiction was as psychological as it was physical. Ceruse, by damaging the skin, required thicker applications, trapping women in a vicious cycle. Margaret's maids spoke of noble women who slept in their paint, unable to face their bare, ravaged faces. At court, a single blemish could spark rumors of disease or disfavor, turning beauty into a prison. Margaret, now guest at regional banquets, felt the weight of every glance, her painted face a shield against whispers. To falter was to fall, to lose the dream of Whitehall she'd chased since 1578. The irony was haunting. Women sought immortality through beauty, but found mortality instead. Their painted faces, meant to defy time, became masks of decay. Margaret's mirror, once her lie, now mocked her, reflecting not a queen but a spectre. Her breath came short, her heart raced, yet she clung to her ritual, each brush stroke a prayer for redemption. She thought of Elizabeth, whose radiance still inspired ballads, unaware that the Queen's own body was crumbling under the same poison. The disintegration was not just physical, it was social. Women who fell ill-faced isolation, their husband, scorn, or whispers of witchcraft. Margaret's suitors, once eager, now hesitated, her frailty a stain on her allure. At a 1584 banquet, she overheard a courtier murmur, "She's a ghost already," his words a knife to her heart. Yet she smiled, her painted face flawless, her pain buried deep. The court, like her mirror, demanded perfection, and perfection demanded poison. As Margaret prepared for another evening, her hands shaking as she applied ceruse, she felt a flicker of doubt. Her maid's warnings, once ignored, echoed in her mind. Her body, screaming its betrayal, begged her to stop. But the dream of court, the vision of Elizabeth's alabaster face, held her fast. The slow disintegration was a price she still paid, unaware that voices, physicians, priests, and brave women were beginning to rise against the poison that bound her. The truth was near, but for now she was a prisoner of her own reflection, her beauty a fading flame in a sea of white. In the flickering candle light of Elizabethan England, where Lady Margaret Holly's painted face hid a body crumbling under poison, and Queen Elizabeth I's court shimmered with ghostly pallor, a quiet rebellion stirred, the pale obsession, fueled by Venetian ceruse and Mercury, had claimed to many noble women wasting away, their beauty a mask of decay. Yet not all were blind to the danger. Physicians, priests, and courageous women began to whisper warnings, their voices a fragile spark against a culture that worshipped whiteness at the cost of life. For Margaret, trapped in her mirror's gaze, these whispers were a distant echo, but they signaled a truth she could no longer ignore. Dr. John Bannister, a London physician, was among the first to raise the alarm. In 1585, as Margaret's tremors worsened, he published a treatise decrying powders that corrode the flesh. His patients, noble women like Lady Catherine Grey, showed blackened teeth, trembling limbs, and clouded mind symptoms he traced to ceruse and mercury. "These are no cosmetics," he wrote. but poisons that steal the soul, as words, bold for an era ruled by royal fashion, were met with scorn. Apothecaries, backed by wealthy patrons, branded him a fearmonger, their profits tied to the jars that lined their shelves. Yet Bannister persisted, his clinic a refuge for those too sick to paint over their pain. Priests, too, joined the chorus. Puritan clerics, railing against vanity, called cosmetics the devil's paint. In London's churches, figures like Reverend Thomas Bentham preached fire and brimstone, pointing to sickened women as proof of divine wrath. God made your face, he thundered, and you defile it with death. Their sermons, though moralizing, struck a chord with servants and commoners, who saw their mistresses decline. But noble women, bound by courtly expectations, dismissed the clergy as zealots. Duty was a social duty, not a sin, and Elizabeth's alabaster face was their gospel. The most poignant warnings came from those closest to the afflicted. Mary, Margaret's loyal maid, wept as she brushed her mistress's thinning hair in 1585. "It's killing you, milady," she whispered, her voice trembling. Margaret, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, turned away, her ceruse-caked face a brittle mask. To abandon her Potter was to abandon her dream of court, a dream born in 1578 when she first glimpsed her pale reflection. Mary's pleas echoed those of other servants, who saw their ladies' blackened teeth and trembling hands, but were powerless against the mirror's tyranny. A few women dared to listen. Lady Jane Seymour, a minor noble at Elizabeth's court, cast aside her ceruse in 1580 for after a near-fatal collapse. Her bare face, freckled and scarred, shocked Whitehall. Courtiers whispered of rebellion, branding her a heretic against beauty's creed. Jane, once a rival to Lady Anne Clifford, faced exile from masks and the scorn of her husband, but she stood firm. "I choose life over paint," she declared, her words a quiet manifesto. Her defiance inspired others. Lady Eleanor Percy, a young widow, followed suit, her unpainted skin a silent protest. These women, though few, were beacons in a sea of conformity. The cost of resistance was brutal. Unpainted women faced ridicule, their flaws fodder for courtly gossip. Jane's suitors vanished, her status plummeted, and Elizabeth herself, now 52, and ever more dependent on ceruse, eyed her with disdain. The Queen's court, a mirror of her pale ideal, offered no mercy. Margaret, hearing of Jane's rebellion at a regional banquet, felt a pang of envy, but recoiled at the thought. Her own skin, raw and peeling, demanded thicker paint, her mirror a judge that sentenced her to poison. To stop was to face exile, to lose the dream she'd chased through years of pain. The whispers grew louder, but the court's delusion held fast. Elizabeth, her face a thick mask of ceruse, presided over masks where her ladies staggered under their paint's weight. Lady Clifford, once radiant, now fainted mid-dance, her collapse hushed up by loyal attendants. The Queen's own health faltered, her hands shook, her speech slurred, but her image remained untouchable. Apothecaries, like Thomas Culpeper, from Margaret's cheap-side visits, doubled down, offering stronger mercury blends to mask the damage. Patience, they urged, as their clients withered. Margaret's own resistance flickered but faded. Her body screamed its betrayal, headaches blinded her, her breath came short, but her heart clung to Elizabeth's myth. At a 1585 banquet, she overheard a physician echo Bannister's warnings. describing a poison that eats the bones. For a moment, she hesitated, her brush poised above her ceruse jar, but the mirror, reflecting a face that could still pass for noble, silenced her doubt. She painted on, her hands trembling, her dream of Whitehall, a fading star, Mary's tears, Bannister's treatise, Jane's defiance, they were truths she wasn't ready to face. The resistance, those small planted seeds of doubt. Bannister's writings reached Oxford's scholars, Bentham's sermons stirred London's streets, and Jane's bare face haunted courtiers' dreams. These whispers were sparks in a storm of vanity, but they signaled change. For Margaret, they were a distant hope, her body too far gone to heed them. As she prepared for another evening, her ceruse cracking over sores, she stood at a crossroads. The pale obsession had claimed her youth, her health, her future, but its legacy would outlive her, a cautionary tale etched in poison. The white face of death, born in the candle-lit chambers of Elizabethan England, did not vanish with Lady Margaret Hale or Queen Elizabeth I. The pale obsession, driven by Venetian ceruse and Mercury, left a trail of shattered lives, women like Margaret, who chased nobility, and a queen whose myth inspired poison. Their tale, carved in lead and loss, resonates through centuries, a stark reminder. What do we sacrifice to be seen, and who defines beauty's worth? By 1586, Margaret's fate was sealed at 27. Her body was a frail echo of the girl who, in 1578, brushed ceruse across her cheeks, dreaming of Whitehall. Her skin, ravaged by lead, wept sores, her hair was gone, her teeth black stumps. Tremors shook her hands, her memory faded, and her breath faltered. Yet she painted on, her mirror, her final refuge, her death. A whispered wasting sickness was no enigma to Dr. John Bannister, whose 1585 warnings went unheard. Margaret joined countless noble women, their graves unmarked, their beauty a ghost. Elizabeth I, the obsession's architect, outlived Margaret, but not her poison. By 1603, at 69, her face was a fortress of ceruse, hiding decay. Her health, eroded by decades of lead and Mercury, failed. Her final portraits reveal a spectre, not a sovereign. Her court ladies, like Lady and Clifford and Lady Catherine, gray-mirrored her decline, their painted faces crumbling. Elizabeth's image, meant to immortalize, became a curse, a standard binding generations to its deadly ideal. The legacy of lead endured. In the 18th century, women slathered lead creams, ignoring warnings. Victorians consumed arsenic wafers for clear skin, dying pale like Margaret. In the 20th century, radium creams glowed with false promise, killing their users. Each ear echoed Elizabeth's myth, perfection at any price. Today, skin-lightening creams, some laced with mercury, recall Cheapside's apothecaries where Margaret shopped. Digital filters craft flawless faces, a modern mirror demanding conformity. Cosmetic surgeries reshape us for fleeting ideals. Their scars hidden but real. The parallel is clear. Margaret, inspired by Elizabeth's radiance, saw her face as her value, much as we chase social media's approval. Elizabeth, securing her throne with an image, lost her vitality as we added ourselves to fit society's frame. Their tragedy is ours, beauty as a cage, its bars forged by culture, media, algorithms, and new Whitehall. no less cruel. The Resistance Bannister's treatises, Lady Jane Seymour's bare-faced lives in today's voices, from activists rejecting filters to individuals embracing flaws. What did beauty cost? For Margaret, her life stolen by lead; for Elizabeth, her health traded for a mask; for their court, a generation lost. For us, the price is subtler hours curating images, dollars chasing trends, confidence eroded. The legacy of lead is a challenge. Who sets beauty's standard? In 1580, it was a queen and her court. Today, its brands, screens, and us. Margaret's mirror lies silent, but its lesson endures. She painted to belong, unaware her true beauty, her courage, dreams was unpainted. Elizabeth, too, was more than her mask, her strength and her mind. Their story calls us to question the ideals we chase, to see beyond the surface. Jane Seymour, bearing her scars, showed the way of beauty that doesn't destroy. Now we stand before our mirror screens, cameras, eyes. Will we paint over our truths or embrace our flaws? The white face of death lives in our filters, our doubts, but so does resistance, the courage to be real. What's your mirror telling you? Have you ever chased an ideal that cost too much? Share your story below or join our channel to explore more tales of beauty and truth. Let's redefine beauty together and paint it. Unafraid